Paris in the fall, the last months of the year and the end of the millennium. The city holds many memories for me, of cafes, of music, of love, and of death.
Welcome everyone. I'm WellPlayed, Zach Jackson, and with me is Nathan Hennessy from WellPlayed as well. Nathan, thanks for joining us. We're delighted to be joined by Revolution Software's founder and Broken Sword creator, Charles Cecil, here to have a chat about Broken Sword, Shadow of the Templars Reforged. Charles, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
It's always a pleasure to have a chat. Before we get stuck straight into the actual game questions, I got a very quick question for you, just about how this all kind of came about. So the first question I want to start with is, Xbox is not a platform that I would directly associate with Broken Sword. I played it on PlayStation back in way back in the day, but both the new Broken Sword games were announced at the Gamescom showcase, I think, for Xbox. I'd love to know how that kind of partnership kind of came about.
Well, we will be releasing the game on all three consoles, and actually, Xbox are some fairly senior people at Xbox are fans of the original, and we're very excited to see the new one in 4K, and just invited us to be part of their platform. So it's not a suggestion that we are in any way favouring Xbox over PlayStation or Switch, but it was a great platform on which to make the announce.
I think we were chatting internally, and I kind of said that Gamescom does kind of make sense because you've always said that Germany has a very big adventure game presence, and they're big fans of Broken Sword. So I guess it shouldn't come as any real surprise that that's where you unveiled it.
Oh, I mean, the other thing that I need to give a huge credit to Virgin Interactive, who were our publisher back in the 90s, who were very progressive in understanding that you should take localizations really seriously. And at the time, a lot of English developers weren't, and some of them were putting them through really terrible translators. And they were mocked by the Germans, and the magazines would print German phrases, and ask their readers to try and identify what on earth this was meant to mean. I mean, it was ludicrous. And what Virgin did was they got really fantastic translators and then actors in Germany, where the game is actually called Baphomet's Fluch. They got for Nico, they got the voice of Gillian Anderson, the dubbing voice of Gillian Anderson. And that was a brilliant move because this actress, whenever she spoke, everybody recognized her voice. She had quite a deep voice, and they associated it with Gillian Anderson. And I went to a wedding of a German friend a couple of years ago, and his brother stood up and talked about playing Baphomet's Fluch without any idea that it was Broken Sword or that we were connected. And when I went to talk to him, he was absolutely astonished to hear that Revolution was an English developer rather than a German developer. And we've heard the same thing from French as well. So that very intelligent approach that Virgin did has certainly paid great dividends for us since then.
So why, given that it's coming up to nearly 30 years of age with the first Broken Sword, why now? Why did now feel like the right time to remaster it?
But I wish I had a really brilliant answer. All I would say is that we have the most wonderful community, and people have been asking us for years whether we could do a version for modern platforms. And they were saying, "Oh no, you don't need to upscale them. You don't need to do anything. Just release the game. Just release the game." And I thought that we've got a one-off opportunity to reinvent the game. Um, and we and the team finished Beyond Steel Sky, and was coming free, and it was a question of deciding, and that just felt like a great time to be able to um, re reimagine the game at high resolution, at 4K rather than 640 400. And the response when we started talking about it was fantastic. It's been a huge endeavor. There are over 30,000 sprites. Each one takes an hour to redraw, and primarily we have redrawn vast majority of them, many of them just from scratch. And as you can imagine, 30,000 or 35,000 times 35,000 hours times £15 an hour for a good artist is over £500,000 on the sprites alone. So it's a massive job, and that's why when we did our Kickstarter, and I'm sorry because you're probably going to mention that later, but when we did the Kickstarter, it was just a fantastic endorsement. Kickstarter is brilliant in so many ways, but one of them is just getting an endorsement from the community to say, yes, this is a game that we really want. Sorry for messing up your order.
That's all right. It's actually kind of reorganized it, so you've done well. But I guess it's been it's been 10 years since we had the last Broken Sword game, or more than 10 years actually. I think it was like 11 years now. Was it a deliberate choice to release this remaster or Reforged first to kind of drum up more interest in the next installment in Broken Sword?
Oh yes, yeah, no, very, very well. Not a deliberate, but it certainly works because we are writing a new Broken Sword as well. The thing about adventure games is that they are super expensive to write because of the unique aspect of the graphics and the gameplay. And so we do rely on the success of games to generate the revenues, which then allow us to write new games. So it works well for us, certainly, and it
Do
is
you,
necessary to fund new games as well.
yeah, do you think um with the remar or the Reforged and the new one, there's going to be a lot of crossover gameplay wise. So I guess new players that come into the series through the Reforged will kind of transition to the new one quite nicely.
Well, certainly I hope so. We certainly say that you don't need to have played any of the previous games, but it's a little bit like I certainly use Tintin as the sort of model because I love the old Tintin books. And the thing about the Tintin books is that you can read them in any order, but clearly there are some characters that are introduced earlier in the series, and it's quite fun to read them in any order you want, and then it's great to see the appearance of characters. And that was the sort of way that I wanted to approach it. But the other thing is that because the franchise has been going for so long, and it has been very successful over 20 years, 25 years. There are millions and millions and millions of people who've played it and loved it, and maybe don't play games anymore, but would do if they knew that we'd brought it back again. And what excites me is the opportunity to potentially to build on other Broken Sword games as well, and potentially, and we've had interest from television. We actually had an offer from a very significant television company here in the UK, and turned them down because our agent felt that Broken Sword is so perfect for television that actually we should be very ambitious in what we want. So it's kind of exciting times. I mean, you will undoubtedly have heard about the doom and the gloom, and how awful it is that so many people have lost their jobs, and how ridiculous it is as well, because the demand
Mm.
for video games is higher than it was before the pandemic started. So to anyone with common sense, the industry is growing, but it is just doing it in a sort of zigzag shape. And so for us, who to be able to reach out to our community and to get so much support in times that are quite difficult is absolutely fantastic.
Nathan, do you want to whack in one of your questions here?
I certainly do, and I was like quite chuffed with the mention of the offers regarding adaptation. I wanted to touch on that, covered it, brilliant. So obviously now spending a lot of time with Shadow of the Templars, with Reforged being worked on, I'm curious to know if you see the original title as having sort of design lessons for maybe modern games, or conversely, if more modern point and click titles perhaps have lessons for the original game that you might have been interested in bringing forth to Reforged. Maybe it fell out of scope, maybe not. But any changes that's come across your?
Well, thank you. That's we were redesigning the touch interface and kind of assumed that everybody knew how point and click worked. I went onto the App Store and we're getting 85% review scores. Very strong. All looked well. So we thought, just as a sort of house cleaning, we'd keep it. We'd put it out to random testers on a web service. And I was absolutely shocked to get scores of 50% back and real negativity. And that was such a bold. This was actually Broken Sword 2 that we did it, just because it suited us better.
Mm.
And it was a real shock. At the same time, I started playing some other adventure games, modern adventure games, and found them really frustrating and actually boring. And these two things really struck a chord with me. Like, why adventure games that I used to love, I'm now not excited by. And so then we got a young person, 14, so Gen Alpha, in for work experience, and he was a real gamer, and he played the original game in 640-400 and loved it, and made the statement, and he was being completely genuine. He said, I love this game. I didn't know games like this existed. I didn't know this genre of game existed. I love playing the game at my own pace, and it's like discovering video games for the first time again. And that was a phenomenal thing. So these three things really played on my mind, and it felt to me that the actual interface is ideal. The 101 of any game design is start with a simple interface and build complexity from there. But the user journey, it struck me had been left in the 1990s. The interface and I went to the wonderful Adventure X, and somebody was talking about, which I didn't know, is that there are point and click interfaces, a few of them, and one of them is called the Beneath the Steel Sky interface because of what we did then. One is called the Broken Sword interface. So we were absolute pioneers back in the 90s. But we were designing icons, for example, that worked in 640-400. People are still doing the same icons, even though we're now in 4K. It was ludicrous. So what we did was completely this sort of shock of, one, why are adventure games, in my opinion, not working for a modern audience? Me. Two, how come we're getting high review scores from our users, and yet we're getting low review scores from random users who don't play adventure games? And three, really, two intelligent gamers, and adventures are played by intelligent gamers, so we just accept that. Those three came together, and we started reworking. We got videos of people, and we looked to see exactly where this was qualitative rather than quantitative. A relatively small number playing for half an hour, but we watched those videos. We watched exactly how people played, where they got, because they were giving us a voiceover, where they got stuck, why they got stuck, and we reinvented the interface. And then put it back out again. And our scores, when we iterated a few times, and we went back from 50% back up to 80%. So it was an incredible learning exercise. And I would hope, and ultimately, what I really want is, I don't want people to get stuck. When the game released in the 90s, getting stuck was kind of part of the gameplay. It was part of what you did. It was what people sort of enjoyed. An audience doesn't want that anymore. So what we're really fighting for is, and we're using the original game as the base, is to help people progress. One of the things that we're doing, for example, I ought to say we've got the classic mode, which is just what anybody who played point-and-click adventures and wants that's what they get. But then we have a story mode, which is the same puzzles, but we try and move you forward if you get stuck. And one example is that as you explore, if you click on the hotspot and both on the action and the lookout, then if it's not directly relevant to solving the puzzle, then we just simply remove it. So what we're doing is we're effectively focusing the player on the solution by rewarding them for exploration. After a certain amount of time, we just put a gentle little sparkle. Look over here, look over here. So ultimately what I want people to feel smart. One of the strengths of our games, I would like to think, and people say, is that our puzzles feel more like interesting narrative challenges. So what I want people to just keep going and to keep feeling smart, because they're the ones solving the puzzles. But if they spend more than a certain amount of time, we just start gently moving them towards the solution. And as I say, so far, the random reviews have gone way up from being very weak to strong again. So I'm really excited by our approach, and we've got more to do.
You bring up a very good point, because this is something. So I've reviewed a few adventure games in the past, little while, past couple of years, and there's been quite
That's
a
right.
few that I feel that are stuck in the past, or they're trying to recapture that magic of the past. That's not fun anymore because, like you say, the demand for games is higher than ever. There's so much more choice now than probably there was back then, and I think it's very easy to kind of pick up a game that's frustrating to play, and then you just drop off it, and you just never come back to it again. So I guess this is more of a general question for adventure development. How do you kind of get the right mix now of, not making it too easy, so there's still a bit of a challenge, but not making sure, not getting the player stuck.
And that's the $1 million question. That's the $1 million question. Because the thing is that, did you play the original Broken Sword?
Yeah, we've both played a few times.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
So you remember there's a goat puzzle in there.
How could I forget?
I just knew it was coming. Yes.
And the goat puzzle was put in. The reason that I designed that was because I listened stupidly to a very vocal minority who said, "Oh, adventure games are too easy. Adventure games are too easy." And so I put a real stinker of a puzzle in to stop people. Now the problem is that because our games have puzzles that are driven forward by what I'd like to think is the logic of character motivations and the world at that time, you need to think quite hard about how to stop the solution being obvious. Now, other games, and I love Monkey Island, but Discworld was probably one of the worst offenders in this case of just having really contrived puzzles that make no sense whatsoever. And the old school, a lot of the old school really enjoyed that, but new people don't. And I give, and as I say, I love Monkey Island, but the example that of course gets used, and it's probably unfair because it's probably one of the most extreme, but it's there is a nut that you need to undo. So how could you possibly know that you need to get a banana, put it on a metronome to get the monkey into a state of hypnosis, and then put the monkey into your pocket, and then it turns into a monkey wrench, which it makes no sense. The reward is retrospective. The reward is the gag.
Yes.
And I don't know about in Australia, but in the UK, we don't even use the word monkey wrench. We use adjustable spanner. So
Yes.
on so many levels, that puzzle just didn't work at all. And as I say, that they're brilliantly written. They're really funny. But all of us have to admit that the way that we resorted to playing Monkey Island was by using every object on every background object, combining every item until eventually, when we got stuck, that was the only way to do it. What we're doing in Broken Sword, for example, is that there's many lines where you can combine or try to combine objects. Once you've tried to combine an object, if you fail, we don't give you the option, we gray it out. So
Cool.
as well as wanting to stop people getting frustrated, I want to try and avoid people hearing the same line again and again, because that breaks all of the sense of immersion that you have is broken by just hearing exactly the same line being repeated again and again and again. So that's the other mission. So I think it's exciting, but adventures have a game that I really admired was Thimbleweed Park, because it unashamedly said this is a point and click adventure from the 1990s. It is pixel art, and it was exactly what it said, and it did it really, really well. What I'm a lot less impressed by is adventure games that say, oh, this is a game for 2023 or 2024, and actually fall into all of the traps that were set in the 1990s, and they haven't really changed. Of course, they brought some things up to date, but it's the user experience, the gameplay experience, that really matters.
Agreed. With you mentioned the Kickstarter, so we'll go into the Kickstarter. I backed it, by the way, so you're welcome.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's all right. But you must have been, when I saw it, like when it popped up, I was like £50,000. That's like you've got to be pretty confident that you're going to hit that, right? But I'm guessing you had no. I mean, we kind of spoke about it on our own podcast here, but none of us kind of expected it to kind of blow up as much as it did, because you raised more than £618,000. I guess, how does it feel to know that like your game that you made almost 30 years ago can still generate a response kind of like that?
Well, we were told by everybody, including Kickstarter, not to expect anything like because we did a Kickstarter in 2012 for Broken Sword 5, and we raised $770,000 US dollars. And we were told that it would be not to expect anything like that the climate had completely changed. And so that's why that 50,000 was so low, because we said, we're going to write the game. The game is going to come out. This is specifically for a collector's box that is unique. And so wouldn't it be great to have a box that you can open and there are just loads of cool things in there? That's kind of what the selling point was, as well as making the game, allowing us to be more ambitious with the game. But it was about the box. But anyway, so one, it wasn't about the game per se, it was about the box. And two, times have changed. People said you'd be lucky to get a quarter. So I set it at 50,000, basically because I didn't want us to fail. And I thought that was the minimum that we'd get. As it's turned out, we've actually raised more than we did back, because £613,000 is considerably more than $770,000. So it's brilliant. And the other thing is that, I keep saying this, but we have a wonderful. All adventure fans appear to be wonderful. There's so much toxicity in so many communities in certain genres, and we are just incredibly lucky. We just don't get that. We have a very diverse, in terms of gender, in terms of countries, in terms of everything, religion, everything, sexuality. We have an incredibly diverse audience who just get on with each other and get on with us. And, they like us and we love them. And they love each other. It's fantastic. It's a really great place to be.
It's very, very, very exciting. So with you mentioned kind of about the ambitions there, I guess, was there something that you particularly have enjoyed seeing come to life in 4K? Like, is there any particular scene or moment within the game that you're like, this is good?
This takes me back.
What? There are some elements that were really quite weak, even in 640-400 resolution. The George's face changes. There's the Templar scene at the end is very weak. The Templar scene. What we said is the game. That first game is absolutely canon. Okay, so we're not changing anything unless I can stand on a podium and I will defend all of the changes that we've made. Okay, which are not substantial. We have not changed any. We've actually got more dialogue. So there's some dialogue that wasn't included in the original game. that that was never called, either because we removed objects or because there was a logic error. And so we're putting some of that back in, but that is canon. That was written in 1996 and recorded by Rolf and all the other actors back at that time. And so there are elements, and particularly the end cutscene, where we keep all the dialogue, we keep all of everything, but we're able to go back in and say, well, this is the level of detail that we can add now. This is the level of detail that we should add. And you know, as I say, nobody should worry. I hope that nobody should worry that we're changing things, you know, for the sake of it. But we are enhancing elements that I personally thought were weak. There are also continuity change wherever there was a continuity problem. So I mean, I've said this before, but forgive me for repeating myself. You know, right at the very beginning, you walk into the alleyway and you pull the drain pipe, and George says, you know, well, I guess the clown didn't escape over the rooftops, and yet you can see that the drain pipe doesn't even go to the top of the screen. You know, just little things like that. And then in the very first screen, you see the fact that a clown drops an accordion with a bomb in it that blows up on a stool and it blows up. And yet in the first screen, the bomb blast is in the center of the room, and the stool that the bomb was put on is absolutely untouched. Right. Another thing. The assassin escapes, and you find some material, as you may remember, and then he appears in the hotel room, and he's wearing different trousers. He's wearing the same trousers, of course, but he's wearing a purple jacket. And then he goes and he gets the purple trousers and leaves. It's like, has he come back? He must have come back, because if he'd come back, he must have come back to get the purple. But if he got the purple jacket, why didn't he put the purple trousers on? So we're changing that. So he just comes back wearing a shirt. You know, just all of these things that we can sit, and with the benefit of 25 years and this frustration inside, why didn't we get this right? Why didn't we do this at the time? Now we have the opportunity. And, you know, and I hope that nobody will object to the fact that we're making these changes, because they're not changing the heart and soul of the game. They're not changing the canon of the game. They're just addressing irritating little elements that any game player, any adventure player will, you know, and people look at this and go, oh my God, I didn't notice. Well, it's great that they didn't notice, but subliminally, there will have been this sense that just something doesn't quite make sense. We're fixing all of those things.
So I guess one of the series' strengths, and especially I guess the first game, is the chemistry and the characters of George and Nico. And you know, I'm excited that, you know, a new generation of players are gonna you know, start at the beginning of their journey. I guess, how's it been for you, you know, being with these characters for so long, and I guess giving them a second lease on life kind of thing, in, you know, in terms of like a new beginning.
Yeah, well, I mean, George and Nico obviously at the heart, and Nico's the first character that I designed, because I love this sort of 1970s image of Paris when I was a child. I used to go with my mother, and actually George was very much written to be a foil to Nico. And you know, we were very lucky that Rolf, that we found Rolf, and that he's played the part of George through all the Broken Sword games. And you know, people say, "Oh, how progressive of you to have a female, you know, co-protagonist." And I kind of look a little bit strangely, because, you know, we just had a strong female because it made a better story. You know, none of this. Oh, we need to do this. Oh, we need to do that. It's just, you know, a more diverse cast gives a more interesting story. But because Nico, you know, at the time there were very few strong female protagonists. We have quite a large female following as well, which is great. But as I say, it wasn't done deliberately. And while in actual numeric sense, where, you know, there are more male fans than female fans. The women tend to be the more passionate when it comes to Broken Sword, and it's just wonderful to meet, women who it was a really, and men, but fans to whom the game was really important when they were growing up. And what I'm really, really proud of is people who say, I played this game sitting on my parents' knee, and now I'm playing it with my children sitting on my knee. And somebody pointed out, well, now it's coming out in 4K. Our children will play with our grandchildren sitting on their knee. And it's just really, really nice that this is a game that has continued to resonate over 25 years. And hopefully will continue to resonate for another 25 years. Why not?
Why not indeed? Why not?
Well, I guess I just want to pry a little bit further on that topic of Nico and George. And I'm just wondering if you could wax lyrical for me for a moment, Charles. How would you personally like to see, I guess, our new generation or younger generations of gamers relate to these characters? These are very, we're introduced to these characters in the midst of the 90s. This is a Seinfeld era before mobile phones and the like. And we've got a very different generation that's going to be coming up getting to know these folks now. How do you hope they'll relate to them?
Well, as you probably know, I think the younger generation, the Gen Alpha, and the Gen Zs, and probably millennials as well, look back at the 90s and they see it as a bit of a golden age specifically because there were no mobile phones, there was no social media, and I was born in 1962. I think I am extraordinarily lucky. Because in 1962, well, let's say the late 60s, England, the whole of the UK was really grim. We were poor. Everything was sooty and dark from the industrial era. It was just, this is where punk came from. Punk, rose from this sort of anger. Everything was terrible. Not terrible, sorry. Everything was grim and grimy and dark and gritty. And that was lovely, but we were very, very poor compared to pretty much, well, certainly the rest of Europe, probably Australia, certainly Africa. My mother came from Africa in the 50s and was astonished at how poor England was. And then Margaret Thatcher came along, love her or hate her, and magicked all this money out of the city and the North Sea, where she spent all the money. I remember driving along in my first car past the Houses of Parliament, which had always been sort of grimy and sooty. And they were white and gleaming because they'd been sandblasted. And it just looked, I went, oh my God, it's a beautiful building. And they started sandblasting all of these buildings in London. And then my cousin, who lives in New York, came to London and said, London is the coolest city in the world. And I was absolutely blown away. This sooty, grimy, terrible place where none of the public transport worked and, was now the coolest place in the world, according to her and many other people. And then the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. And we knew that the Cold War was over and that the Russians were going to be our friends forever. And things just got better and better until the financial crisis. And it's kind of been going downhill ever since. And my God, we're in a terrible state now with Ukraine and the conflict, well, not the conflict, but the worry about conflict with China, all of these things. And so, for people in my generation, it just got better and better and better. And now it's kind of going down, but it's still so much better than it was. But for a young generation, where it's just been going down, they're profoundly depressed. And they look to the 90s, they look to these eras where the world was simpler and there was this optimism. And I guess that the key to it is Broken Sword is written in an era of optimism, whereas now we are in an era of pessimism. And I would say that is what hopefully people can take from the game.
I like that.
I've always found adventures, we actually mentioned this just the other night, that they're very, well, not always, but most of them are very lighthearted, they're fun, and that's kind of what you get from Broken Sword. Yes, there's a bit of a serious narrative there, but it's still a fun, vibrant, good game, and I think a lot of younger people will respond well to that. Even though we do like our dark and grim games, but there's always still room for a fun and cheerful adventure. But
Well, what's interesting is, and I don't know if you've been watching Fallout.
We
Fallout
have, yes.
is great. And The Last of Us is great. But all of these post-apocalyptic, my sense is that, and I love Fallout, but the problem is with here and now, we are kind of risking going into an apocalyptic era. And so it's scarily familiar or potentially familiar. So perhaps people want something more lighthearted instead. I hope so.
Well,
The Templars can be our escapism.
That's it. Well, you've got quite a little back catalogue for players to jump into. So, and I'm not going to ask the most obvious question because you've already answered that in other interviews, that you'd be mad not to look at Broken Sword 2. But I want to focus a little bit more on 3 and 4 because these games are 3D. So my question is, how much more resources and how much more work, I guess, would it be to kind of bring those up to 4K or, to like remaster them? And is it something that you're considering?
Okay, so 3 was used a commercial rendering engine called Renderware. I think that completely moving to 2D is not something that I would entertain. What I would much rather do is work on the rendering so it felt much more 2D-ish, and the control system so that it was unified into a common control system. That would be my ideal scenario. We will have to wait and see. It's not something I've given huge amounts of thought to. As far as 4 is concerned, we worked. The game was published by a publisher called THQ, who at the time were the largest games publisher in the world. And let's just say that not the European side, but the US side treated us with utter contempt. And so while 3 was a wonderful project with a lot of optimism, 4 we were in the process of falling out with THQ, and they treated us, and indeed pretty much all developers, really badly. I would love to be able to go back to 4 one day and maybe look for some sort of absolution
Okay.
and rewrite it, because the story is strong. I think a lot of the puzzles are strong. Our rule, and this is me just dreaming in the future. I'm not saying that this is something that we're going to do, but I think that the golden rule for me would be none of the dialogue changes. None of the dialogue changes, because then you are absolutely constrained by the canon of that game. And, a bit like Broken Sword 1, where none of the dialogue is changing, but we're able to enhance all the elements. I think Broken Sword 4, reinventing and enhancing that is something that one day that I would love to do.
The last time we spoke, it was about Beyond a Still Sky, and I guess since then you've got 2 Broken Sword games. Just throwing it out there, do you have any desires, or is there ever any plans in the pipeline that Revolution looks at something that is a new IP, or that is something that is not an adventure game? Is that something that you would ever like to do before you hang up the controller, I guess?
Nice try.
I know. That's do you know, it's not something at the moment. No. I think we have to stick to narrative. Not have to. I want to stick to narrative-based games. I always think it's rather arrogant I feel it's really arrogant is when film writers think that they can write games. It's almost as arrogant as thinking that a game writer can write a film script. But within that, we have a wonderful community, and I would like to think skill in narrative games, and I think there's so much scope. I think we probably should have done so much more in narrative than we actually have. When I say we, I mean as developers, and of course, You look at games like Her Story, which approach narrative in a completely different way, and it worked very, very well. Or indeed Lucas Pope with the way that he, or games like Inside, which tell a crazy mad story through the environment and the gameplay, and I really admire that. But for me, I would always stick with narrative based games and try and innovate, because that is just such an exciting area to be in. I think there's still so much to be discovered.
The only reason why I asked is because I had a great time many years ago playing In Cold Blood. So I've always wondered if you'd ever go back. And there was that was a good cop, bad cop that kind of got locked away. But
Well, In Cold Blood, a lot of people asked us
yeah.
about In Cold Blood, and clearly the story was really good. And again, wouldn't it be great to redesign that? Because the problem with In Cold Blood, and I am an absolute bloody idiot for this, is that right at the very beginning, we forced you to duck down, and we didn't tell the player how to control the game, and people got killed really quickly and didn't know why, and then gave up. It was incredibly naive, and it frustrates the hell out of me, because that game was for people who then progressed. They really, really enjoyed it. So who knows? I mean, what we're not going to do is sit on our laurels and just reinvent our original games. But how great it could be to have sort of two prongs: one writing new games, one reinventing the old games. It'd be yeah. I mean, it's great. I mean, thank you. In Cold Blood would be a great one.
It would be good. It would be good. So the game, sorry, and we're talking about Broken Sword Reforged here. That is still on track to come out in Q2. Or has there been any further shift in?
Yeah, this is something that we need to. It is very close, but Q2 is even closer. So we need to do a general update, and I think it would be probably fairer to do that. But it is very, very tight. But it's not. I mean, it's not slipping out of. It's not going off into the future. It is very close. We are in the process of. We've pretty much finished. There's still an awful lot of work to do in polishing, but we're not a month off. We're 2 to 3 months off.
I guess by extension of that, because I know that you are quite a small team, and when I think it was the Gamescom trailers where I think Parzival Stone was also dated 2024, or there was some comments about it.
Yeah,
I would
that's
assume.
not going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say that's
probably on Steam. We've changed that to TBD because we are a small team. I have to say, and I mean everybody says this in it's sort of management talk, but we have a really experienced small team, and it's a real pleasure working with them. But because we're small, we are spending most of our resource and our time on Broken Sword 1 Reforged rather than Broken Sword 6 at the moment.
That's right. We've waited. Was it 11 years? I'm sure another year won't be too bad.
Bless you. That's what somebody when we did our Kickstarter in 2012. I said that the game was going to be released in 6 months, and
I remember.
And one of the stretch goals was to add an extra level, like an extra section. Like, how could I possibly have put down 6 months when? And it really scared me that I was going to have to say that instead of April 2013, it was going to be by the end of April 2013. And I was really worried about the backlash, because at that point, a lot of Kickstarters were going wrong. I think a lot of developers had a contempt for the backers. I mean, really shocking, particularly American. There were some American developers, in my view, being really shockingly complacent about the fact that they were scrapping the Kickstarter. Oh, and keeping the money, by the way. So I was really worried when I said this, and there was basically the responses fell into two categories. One who said exactly that: we've been waiting however many years, and two, well, we never believed you in the first place anyway. So there was no negativity. So that was great. So I think the key to it is just people want to be kept up to date with what and the great thing about Revolution is, because we're small, we can just tell the truth. I mean, obviously there are things that we have to hold back, but broadly, if I say something, it is absolutely true. As to the best of my knowledge, clearly things change, but we're not just playing around and spinning things. We're just telling it as it is.
Very cool. Now we're both very excited for both new games.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to. So I think I can't remember if I mentioned this to you previously, but my partner, she's a very big history buff, and she and this is not a not an insult, but she loves to fall asleep to Broken Sword because it's quite calming, and it's a nice game for her to kind of just relax and go to sleep to. But I think with a 4K version of Shadow of the Templars, I think she's going to get quite invested because it's right up her alley in terms of the history and just that lighthearted adventure. So I think she might stay awake during the new playthrough.
Brilliant.
So.
Brilliant.
I do have a little fun last question for you, and this might put you on the spot. Well, actually, it is putting you on the spot. But if you right now had to pitch a game to us or a new version of Broken Sword that wasn't an adventure game, how would you pitch Broken Sword?
Not as an adventure game.
Not as an adventure game. So what's a different genre that you think that the story elements and that you could make that work?
Okay. I would not. If so, it is a Broken Sword game, but it's not an adventure game.
It's not a point-and-click adventure.
I would say not a point-and-click adventure.
Yeah.
No. In which case, I would say that it goes back into history to explain some of the backstory to either Nico or George, why they're both inquisitive, why they're both adventurers, where they came from, and I think that would then give me the license to. It would still have to be a narrative game, otherwise it wouldn't be Broken Sword. But it
Yes.
it would give me the license to write an adventure in a slightly different way if I chose to. But what I'm basically saying is that I don't think it would be sensible to do it in the current day for George and Nico. I think it'd be best to go into their past and benefit from the fact that people would be inquisitive about the roots of George and Nico and where they came from.
I get a sense that you've thought about this.
How's that for an answer?
That's very good, but I feel like you've thought about that before. Is this something that you've contemplated?
No.
Yeah, fair enough. Amazing. Nathan, do you have any more questions?
Look, I'll squeeze out just one last quick one. We quite enjoy finding out what creators are sinking their teeth into media-wise. So is there any games, shows, books, or anything that you've got on your plate that's really helping you along your creative journey at the moment, Charles? Or you're just really enjoying?
Fallout TV series I'm really enjoying, as I said, and The Last of Us before that. I'm looking forward to Civil War, which I'm probably the only person that hasn't watched.
I haven't either, and I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't played any games for a few months just because I just haven't had any time. But I love games like Dredge and Dave the Diver, and just really, really fun game. I've got a new OLED Steam Deck. I am so excited. I love my Steam Deck. I mean, I love my Steam Deck, and now I've got an OLED one. It's just fantastic. And we've got the new Switch coming out next year. Although obviously Nintendo don't deny or confirm that such a thing even exists. But I think we can be pretty. So that'll be very exciting. So it's going to be a great period. But
are you partial to a bit of handheld in bed?
I am, yes. I am. Yeah,
yes,
no, very much so. It's great.
Yeah,
with a pillow behind me.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's really good, and these things in so that I don't wake the missus up. And yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. It's so great to have an evening and know that actually I've got a few hours and I can just sit and do this, and she'll sit and watch the television. And I'll really get into a game. And I have to admit that I really like the indie games. They're the ones, particularly ones that'll take 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. I can't spend hundreds of hours playing these huge AAA games.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with Dredge there. We loved it from our friends over the sea
Great
in New
game.
Zealand. Yeah,
Good stuff.
Oh, good for them. I didn't know it was from
Yeah,
New
they're-
Zealand. Well, good for them.
the little folks that could.
That's it.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
it's got bags of character. Actually, talking about that, do you remember the Australian game, mobile game where you landed aeroplanes?
Of
Flight
course,
Control?
surely
Flight
it was.
Control?
Was it Flight Control?
I think it was. Yeah.
We're thinking like the famous iPad game that went gangbusters.
Yeah. It came from Victoria. Some of your developers in Victoria, I think.
Flight
But
Control.
if you're in
yeah.
Melbourne, you're in Victoria, aren't you? So
We are.
We are.
you
We
know,
are.
Yeah. So there'll be local developers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And talking of which, I'm really looking forward to, in any moment now, seeing Heather Phelan, wife of Barrington Phelan, who Barrington sadly passed away. He is a Manly Beach boy. She now lives, well, they both lived, and she still lives just south of Brisbane, which sounds like an absolutely heavenly place to be.
Oh, absolutely.
So my Australian I have, talking to a lot of Australian people today, which is a great pleasure, of course.
It is.
That's
It's
been mutual.
It has. Yeah, it's been great to have a chat, and that's actually where I was going to leave it off. I did have a question, but I just wanted to say that probably one of the main reasons I backed that Kickstarter is because of the high fidelity soundtrack. So please say thank you to Barrington's wife, because that music in that first game, well, those first two games, is just, it's amazing. Like, and I still listen to it now. Like, even when I'm just writing or doing stuff, I'll just whack on the soundtrack.
Oh, nice.
So you have to get them on Spotify
Thank
for
you.
us, please, Charles, because I don't have an Apple Music account, so I actually had to go buy them on iTunes. But that's all right.
Well, you'll get them as part of your backers rewards anyway.
That's wow. 4K, no, not 4K. Yeah, but the high fidelity, I'm very, very, very excited to give that a listen. Thank you once again. It's been great to chat. Best of luck with all the rest of the game's development. We're very, very excited. And enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you so much for your
Fantastic. Thank you
time.
very much, guys.
Amazing.
Lovely.
Thank you.